Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we are tackling Leo Babauta's The Power of Less, and you might be surprised how much this book resonates, even if you haven't actually read it. It's really about cutting through the clutter, not just on your desk, but like in your life.
It's interesting, how Babauta starts. He acknowledges the elephant in the room, like we're drowning in information and tasks and demands. But instead of advocating for a complete retreat, like Thoreau or something, he offers this more, I think, practical path.
Right. He doesn't tell us to go live in a cabin and dish our smartphones and everything. Instead, it's really about giving you the tools to find that peace within the chaos. And one of his core principles that I found really interesting is this idea of setting limits. What's like the thinking there?
Yeah. Well, he argues that most of us are living without boundaries, and that leads to this feeling of overwhelm that I think you probably know all too well. It's like we're on a constant treadmill, but we're not really going anywhere.
Yeah, it's not just about work, right? It's
It,
about like everything. How much news we consume and how many commitments we make, even just like how much stuff we accumulate.
exactly. And here's the key takeaway, I think, from this. He suggests that you set limits, but do it in specific areas where you feel the most overloaded. So he actually gives you this framework where you look at your current usage, you set a lower limit, and then you test it out to see if it actually works for you.
It's about like getting intentional about saying no to the things that drain your energy and your time.
Mhm.
But like, where do you even begin? How do you pick which areas to actually focus on first?
Right. That's where the idea of choosing the essential comes in. And he argues that many productivity systems actually, I think, are flawed because they prioritize speed over purpose.
So it's not just about like getting things done quickly, but it's about getting the right things done.
Exactly. And he really encourages you to ask yourself this really powerful question. What do I want to be essential about?
I love that. It's about aligning your actions with your values. But how do we actually figure out like what those essential things are?
Yeah. So he gives you this series of questions to kind of guide you. What are your most important values? What are your goals? What do you love? What is most important to you? What will make the biggest impact? Answering these, I think, helps you prioritize what truly matters. And then you set limits around everything else.
I think a lot of people get hung up on this idea of setting limits because they see it as restrictive. But what he's really saying is that by setting limits, you're actually freeing yourself up to focus on the things that really, truly matter.
That's a great point. It's not about deprivation. It's about creating space for the things that bring you joy, purpose, and meaning.
And that kind of leads us into another key principle from the book, which is the power of focus.
Hmm.
He really highlights focus as like the essential tool for achieving anything worthwhile.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that he actually breaks down focus into like four key areas. The first is focusing on a specific goal or habit you're trying to develop. The
hmm
second is focusing on being present in the moment, just fully engaged in whatever you're doing right now.
So no more multitasking while checking your phone and planning tomorrow's grocery list.
Precisely. The third is he emphasizes the importance of single tasking, which means focusing on one task at a time and resisting the urge to juggle multiple things at once. And finally, he talks about focusing on positive thoughts. He believes that cultivating a positive mindset is crucial for achieving your goals and feeling fulfilled.
Let's dig a little deeper into this idea of single tasking because I think especially in a world where multitasking is often seen as like this badge of honor, why is it so important?
Well, he presents a very compelling argument against multitasking, and he actually cites research showing that it makes us less efficient. When we switch back and forth between tasks, our brains take time to refocus, and this constant shifting actually leads to errors and reduced productivity.
Yeah. It's kind of like trying to drive a car while texting and eating a sandwich at the same time.
Yeah.
You might think you're being productive, but you're actually increasing your risk of crashing.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And it's not just less efficient, it's incredibly stressful, right? It keeps us in this constant state of mental agitation, and it prevents us from fully immersing ourselves in anything.
So single tasking is not just about getting more done. It's about finding a sense of calm amidst all the chaos. But like, how do we actually put this into practice? What are like some concrete strategies we can use?
Well, he suggests a few, I think, simple but effective techniques. The first is to prioritize your most important task, your MIT, each morning. This is the one thing that will move the needle the most on your goals for the day.
So if you could only accomplish one thing today, what would it be?
Right. Once you've identified your MIT, it's time to eliminate distractions. Put your phone on silent, close any unnecessary tabs on your computer, and just create a calm and focused workspace.
Okay, that makes sense. But like, what about those times when you just can't seem to focus, when your mind is racing with like a million thoughts?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of being present in the task at hand. So if you find your mind wandering, you just gently bring it back to the task you're working on. And if you're struggling to stay focused for long periods, you can try the Pomodoro technique, setting a timer for 25 minutes of focused work, followed by a 5-minute break.
It's amazing how much you can accomplish when you give yourself permission to focus on just one thing at a time. And I love that he provides these very practical tools to help us implement these principles in our daily lives.
Absolutely. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore even more practical strategies from The Power of Less, including his approach to forming new habits, setting goals, and managing projects effectively.
Ooh, stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back. We're diving deeper into the practical side of The Power of Less, picking up where we left off. Remember we were talking about that whole single tasking thing?
Oh, yeah. That really resonated with me. I've definitely been trying to be more mindful about focusing on one thing at a time.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. He takes this principle of single tasking and he applies it not just to like individual tasks, but also the way we approach our like work as a whole. He talks about simplifying your task list by like focusing on those critical few and using batch processing for maximum efficiency.
You know, we've talked about batch processing before on the show, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about how it works in practice. What are some examples of how we can actually apply it to our daily lives?
Think about like all the different types of tasks you do throughout the day, like checking email, making phone calls, writing reports, brainstorming ideas. Instead of constantly like switching between those activities, he suggests that you designate specific time blocks for like similar tasks.
So instead of checking email every 5 minutes, I might set aside like 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon to process my inbox.
Exactly. And you can apply this to other activities too. Let's say you need to make several phone calls. Instead of spreading them out throughout the day, you allocate a 30-minute block and you just power through them all.
Yeah. It's amazing how much more you can get done when you're not constantly switching gears.
Right. And it reduces mental fatigue too. And he even suggests applying this to things like, handling paperwork, checking specific websites for updates, research, even maintenance tasks like responding to reader comments if you're a blogger.
So it's about creating those pockets of focused time where you can really like immerse yourself in a particular type of work.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about time management. And you'll be relieved to know that he doesn't advocate for those like rigid hour-by-hour schedules that can feel so restrictive.
Oh, thank goodness. I've tried those before, and I always end up feeling stressed and behind.
He champions a more flexible approach, centered on prioritizing tasks and embracing those moments of flow when you're fully immersed in your work and time seems to just fly by.
Oh, yes, that flow state. That feeling of being completely absorbed in what you're doing, where you lose track of time and everything just clicks.
Exactly. And he gives you some insights on like how to cultivate this state of flow. First, choose a task that you're genuinely passionate about, something that challenges you just enough to keep you engaged, but not so much that it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot between challenge and enjoyment.
Right. And once you've found that task, eliminate any potential distractions. Turn off your phone, close any unnecessary tabs on your computer, create a calm and focused workspace.
It's funny, because sometimes the simplest advice is actually the most profound. We all know we should eliminate distractions, but how often do we actually do it?
It's so true. It's easy to get caught up in like the whirlwind of our digital lives and forget the power of simply disconnecting and focusing on the task at hand.
Speaking of digital distractions, let's talk about the elephant in the inbox. Email. I think most of us can relate to that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by that constant influx of messages. So what's his advice for taming the email beast?
His number one tip is to limit the amount of time that you actually spend in your inbox.
Yeah, easier said than done, right?
It definitely takes discipline, but he offers some practical strategies. Instead of like constantly checking for new messages, you set specific times to process your inbox, maybe twice a day for 30 minutes each time. He even suggests turning off those email notifications altogether.
Wow. Okay. That's a bold move, but I can see how it would like free up so much mental space.
Right. It's about reclaiming control over your inbox instead of letting it control you. He also recommends reducing the incoming stream by unsubscribing from any unnecessary newsletters, filtering out junk mail, and setting clear expectations with people about your email availability.
So it's not just about processing email more efficiently, it's about being more proactive in managing the flow of messages.
Exactly. And these same principles, I think, of intentionality and setting limits can be applied to how we use the internet in general.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I could easily lose hours just scrolling through social media or like clicking on random articles.
He understands that the internet has kind of become central to our lives, for both work and leisure. But because it offers so much, it can easily become this black hole of distraction.
It's like this never-ending buffet of information and entertainment.
Exactly. So he suggests creating like an internet plan similar to how you set limits in other areas of your life.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How would you go about creating an internet plan?
First, identify your real needs for using the internet. Which sites are essential for your work? Which sites do you use for personal communication or entertainment? Once you've made that distinction, set specific blocks of time for, different online activities.
So instead of mindlessly browsing for hours, I might allocate an hour in the morning for work-related tasks, 30 minutes in the afternoon for checking social media, an hour in the evening for reading news articles or watching videos.
Exactly. It's about being deliberate and setting those boundaries, even in the virtual world. And if you really need to focus on deep, uninterrupted work, he encourages disconnecting from the internet entirely.
Oh, I'll admit, that one's tough for me, but I can definitely see the benefits.
He understands it can be challenging. That's why he even suggests physical strategies like unplugging your internet cable or handing your phone to someone else for a set period of time. He even offers strategies for breaking those patterns if you find yourself struggling with, like, internet addiction.
It sounds almost like a digital detox.
In a way, it is. And by creating these boundaries around our internet usage, we free up time and mental energy for the things that truly matter.
So we've tackled tasks, time management, and the digital realm. What's next on our deep dive into simplifying our lives?
Well, he doesn't stop at the digital world. He also emphasizes the importance of creating a calm and clutter-free physical environment, starting with our workspace.
Oh, I'm so on board with this. I find that my productivity, like, skyrockets when my desk is clean and organized. I'm eager to hear his wisdom on this.
He dedicates a whole chapter to decluttering your workspace and highlights the benefits of a clean desk for focus, calm, and effectiveness. And he starts with a simple but powerful tool, a filing system.
Oh, yes, the dreaded filing system.
Yeah.
I think we all have those piles of paper lurking somewhere in our homes or offices.
He keeps it simple. He suggests using plain manila folders with clear labels, organized alphabetically for easy retrieval. No need for, complicated color coding or elaborate systems.
I love that. Keep it simple, right? But how do we actually prevent those piles from forming in the first place?
He emphasizes the habit of filing immediately. As soon as you're done with a document, file it away in its designated folder. And to prevent those, I'll file it later moments, keep a folder labeled to file or miscellaneous for documents that require action but not immediate filing.
So it's like a system for staying organized without getting bogged down in all those details.
Exactly. And he suggests, having plenty of folders and labels on hand so you can create new files quickly as needed.
That eliminates the excuse of I'll file it later when I have the right supplies.
Right. And here's a key point. He encourages you to question the necessity of, physical copies altogether. In the age of digital documents, can you scan and store things digitally instead? By, slowly reducing your reliance on paper, you create a more streamlined and clutter-free workspace.
Yeah. It's not just about organizing what's already there. It's about being mindful of what comes into your workspace in the first place.
Exactly. And these decluttering principles, they extend beyond the office, too. He also applies them to creating a simple and clutter-free home environment.
Oh, now we're talking. My house definitely has some clutter magnets. What's his approach to, simplifying our homes?
Well, he outlines several benefits of a simple home environment. First, it reduces stress. Visual clutter is a form of visual distraction. And by minimizing that distraction, you create a more, calming and peaceful atmosphere.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. A cluttered space often feels really chaotic and overwhelming.
Right. He also points out that simple homes are more calming and appealing. We often think we need lots of furniture and decorations to make a house feel, homey. But he suggests that the opposite is often true.
It's about quality over quantity, right?
Precisely. And let's not forget the practical benefit. Simple homes are easier to clean. The fewer things you have, the less you have to dust or vacuum or put away.
That's a huge plus in my book. I would much rather spend my time doing something enjoyable than cleaning up clutter. So how do we start, Decluttering our homes. Where do we begin?
He suggests starting with a designated, like a mail center, a central location for handling all incoming mail and paperwork. It might include a wastebasket for junk mail, a simple filing system for important documents, and basic supplies like envelopes and stamps.
Okay, so instead of letting mail pile up on the kitchen counter or the dining room table, it all goes to this designated spot.
Exactly. And he recommends processing your mail immediately. You open it, you sort it, you take action right away. He also suggests having a dedicated inbox for all incoming paperwork bills, school papers, receipts, anything that needs to be filed or acted upon.
It creates a system for staying organized without letting things just pile up and become overwhelming.
Right. And here's a crucial tip. When you're decluttering, question the necessity of keeping everything.
Oh, that's a tough one. I tend to be like a bit of a sentimental hoarder.
He understands it can be hard to let go of things, especially if they have sentimental value, but he encourages you to ask yourself, do I really need this? Do I use it regularly? Does it bring me joy? If the answer is no, it might be time to let it go.
It's about being honest with yourself and making those conscious choices
Yeah,
about what truly deserves a place in your home.
exactly. And if you're struggling to make those choices, he suggests the maybe box technique.
Okay, what's the maybe box technique?
It's really simple. When you're decluttering and you come across an item that you're just not sure about, put it in a box labeled maybe, seal the box, and store it out of sight. If you haven't needed or thought about the item in 6 months or a year, it's probably safe to let it go.
That's brilliant. It takes the pressure off of making those immediate decisions.
Right. And one final tip for decluttering your home. Don't try to do it all at once. Start small. Pick one room or even just one drawer or one shelf and focus on decluttering that space. Once you've made progress in one area, you can move on to the next.
So it's about breaking down the task into manageable chunks and celebrating those small victories along the way.
Exactly. And remember, decluttering isn't just about creating a more aesthetically pleasing environment. It's about creating a more peaceful and functional space that actually supports your overall well-being.
That's a great reminder. Our physical environment can have a huge impact on our mental and emotional state.
Absolutely. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore another powerful way to simplify and enrich your life: slowing down.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing. I'm definitely someone who could benefit from slowing down a bit.
We'll delve into his philosophy of slowing down in various aspects of life, from eating and driving to simply creating space for stillness and contemplation.
I'm eager to hear more about that. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the power of less. We've been talking about decluttering our homes, our workspaces, even our digital lives, and it all feels very outward focused. But now we're shifting gears to something much more internal, this idea of slowing down.
Yeah. It's fascinating how he contrasts the frantic pace of modern life with this power of slowing down. He argues that this constant rushing, it isn't just bad for our well-being, it actually hinders our effectiveness.
It's like we're on this treadmill going faster and faster, but we're not really getting anywhere. We're just exhausted.
Exactly. And, he's not just talking about slowing down physically, he's talking about cultivating a different pace of life. And he gives really practical advice for how to incorporate this slowness into all sorts of everyday activities, starting with something as basic as eating.
Okay. And that's something we can all relate to. How does he suggest that we approach eating more slowly?
Well, he reminds us that it takes about 20 minutes for our brains to register that we're full. And when we eat quickly, we often consume way more food than we need before that signal even reaches our brain.
Oh, so it's not just about enjoying the food. It's about being in tune with our body's natural signals.
Right. And when we slow down and we savor each bite, it's almost like a form of mindfulness practice. We're more present in the experience, and we're more likely to stop eating when we're actually satisfied, not just stuffed.
It's funny, because we often associate slowing down with being less productive, but in this case, it actually helps us make healthier choices.
It's a great point. It's about quality over quantity. And that idea extends to another area where he encourages us to slow down: driving.
Okay, I'll admit I'm definitely a culprit of speeding sometimes. It's like I'm always in a hurry to get to the next thing.
He was the same way. He describes himself as a former, quote, driving maniac, constantly passing people, getting frustrated by slower drivers. But he realized that this aggressive driving style, it wasn't really saving him that much time, and it was just adding a ton of stress to his life.
So what changed his perspective?
He decided to experiment with driving slower, and he discovered a whole bunch of benefits. First, he realized that speeding actually saves very little time, especially when you factor in the increased risk of accidents.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. We often think we're gaining so much time by speeding, but in reality, those few minutes are often negligible.
Exactly. And not only is speeding dangerous, it also wastes gas, right? Accelerating and braking quickly, it burns way more fuel than maintaining a steady speed.
So, by slowing down, we're not only reducing stress and improving our safety, but we're also saving money at the pump.
Right. And beyond the practical benefits, he emphasizes that slowing down while driving can actually enrich your life.
Now, that's intriguing.
Yeah.
How does slow driving lead to a richer life?
He talks about it as a way to kind of let go of the need to rush, to be more present in the moment, to appreciate the journey as much as the destination. It becomes almost meditative.
When you put it that way, it makes so much sense. Instead of seeing driving as this chore we have to endure to get from point A to point B, we can shift our mindset and turn it into a much more mindful experience.
Exactly. And he gives some simple tips for how to incorporate slow driving into your life. Playing relaxing music, leaving early so you don't feel rushed, ignoring other drivers, and just focusing on your own experience.
It's about creating a more intentional approach to driving, one that's less about getting somewhere as quickly as possible and more about enjoying the ride.
Right. And that brings us to a broader point that he emphasizes throughout the book, the importance of creating space for stillness and contemplation in our lives.
That's something I really struggle with. I always feel like I need to be doing something, being productive.
Yeah. He understands that tendency. I mean, we live in a culture that values busyness and productivity above all else. But he argues that those quiet moments of reflection, they're essential for our mental and emotional well-being.
So it's like hitting the pause button on life and giving ourselves permission to just be for a while.
Exactly. And he recommends that we find some quiet time and space each day to disconnect from all the noise and distractions. It could be first thing in the morning, during your lunch break, even for a few minutes before bed.
What are we supposed to do during this quiet time?
He leaves it pretty open-ended. You might meditate, journal, read something inspiring, or just sit in silence and observe your thoughts and feelings. The key is to allow your mind to settle and to reconnect with your inner self.
Yeah, like giving our minds a break from that constant input and allowing ourselves to just breathe.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that consistency is key here. Even a few minutes of stillness each day can make a huge difference in your overall sense of well-being.
So we've talked about slowing down in various aspects of our lives, from eating and driving to creating space for stillness. As we wrap up our deep dive into the power of less, is there anything else you want to highlight from the book?
Yes, there's one more essential piece I want to mention, and it is the power of motivation. He actually dedicates a whole chapter to this, emphasizing its importance in achieving any goal.
Oh, that's so important. We can have all the right tools and strategies, but if we're not motivated, it's all for nothing.
He acknowledges that motivation can be fleeting, but he gives us a set of really practical tools for finding and sustaining it.
Okay, I'm all ears. Share some of his wisdom with us.
So, first, he suggests focusing on the benefits of achieving your goal rather than dwelling on the challenges. By visualizing those positive outcomes, you create a powerful pull toward your desired state.
So it's like painting a picture of your ideal future and letting that image kind of fuel your efforts.
Exactly. He also recommends building anticipation and excitement for your goal. Set a start date, share your goal with others, plan a reward for yourself when you achieve it, anything that gets you energized and looking forward to the process.
Yeah. It's about creating that sense of momentum and making the journey itself enjoyable.
Right. He also emphasizes finding pleasure in the process of achieving your goal. If you dread the steps involved, you're much less likely to stick with it.
So if you hate running, don't set a goal to run a marathon. Find an activity you actually enjoy.
Exactly. Choose a goal that aligns with your interests and values so that the journey itself becomes a source of joy and fulfillment.
That's such an important point. It's not just about the destination, it's about enjoying the ride along the way.
And he also encourages you to seek inspiration from others who've achieved similar goals. Read their stories, watch motivational videos, connect with people who share your aspirations.
Yeah. It's about surrounding yourself with that positive energy and drawing strength from those who've been there before.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of partnering with someone who can provide support and accountability. A friend, family member, a coach, even an online community can make a huge difference.
It's like having a cheerleader in your corner, someone to encourage you when you're feeling discouraged and to celebrate your wins along the way.
And finally, remember to reward yourself for your progress.
Now, who doesn't love a good reward? What are some of his suggestions?
Well, he emphasizes that rewards don't have to be extravagant. It could be something as simple as taking a relaxing bath, buying yourself a new book, spending an afternoon doing something you love.
Yeah, it's about acknowledging your efforts and celebrating those small victories along the way.
Exactly. By consistently rewarding yourself, you create this positive feedback loop that makes it much easier to stick with your goals.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything in this deep dive into the power of less. It's been an incredibly insightful journey, and I've definitely learned a lot about how to simplify my life and focus on what truly matters.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Babauda's book offers such a powerful framework for living a more intentional and fulfilling life. From setting limits to choosing the essential, embracing focus, creating new habits, slowing down, and finding motivation, The Power of Less provides practical tools for creating a life that's both productive and peaceful.
And the key takeaway for me is that it's not about deprivation. It's about making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy. It's about doing less, but doing it better.
Absolutely. And in a world that's constantly demanding more and more and more, I think that's a message we all need to hear.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to think about which area of your life feels the most overloaded. What's one small step you can take today to apply the power of less? Remember, even small changes can have a huge impact over time. Until next time, keep diving.